Hey, welcome, young jerks. Mike Crawford. I'm flying by the seat of my pants, which I often am. Trying to do too much at once, but we'll be okay. We got a great show tonight, and so much is happening with right now with the Karen Reed and the jurors. Everyone wants us to do a show tonight with Betterow. I know that. I've been hearing that, but we have a great show tonight too, and we'll be talking to returning Betterow about Karen Reed definitely, and I may have some things to say about the jurors tonight too, because some stuff has been happening there. But I wanted to kick it off, and the reason I put that video up is that's, as far as I know, that's the last video that we have of Sandra Birchmore. It is a video of her and Matthew Farwell, who used to be a Stoughton police officer. Tonight, we're going to discuss the Sandra Birchmore case, what's going on there. If you don't know, I would always start with the Case podcast. That's like the best place. Kirk Minihane with Dave Cullinane through Barstool Sports. They have a podcast, the Case podcast. Look up the Sandra Birchmore season. It's a great way to find out more information about Sandra Birchmore. It's an ongoing scandal in Massachusetts. It's a young woman that was in a police explorers program that was groomed by police officers. And then she ended up, dead. And they said that she did it herself. And a lot of people are convinced that there was foul play. And it's very scandalous because it's in Canton, Massachusetts, where it happened, where the Karen Reed stuff happened with the same district attorney. There's many cases people are looking at. These are the big two, Karen Reed and Sandra Birchmore. So I got two great guests. I got the two best guests you want on this for Sandra Birchmore. I think, besides like Kirk Minihane and Dave Cullinane, who did that podcast, that those would be the other great guests on this, I think. But I got two great guests. I got Mizzy, who is somebody that has been supporting justice for Sandra Birchmore. She's got a Facebook group. She's got a Twitter. She's done a lot of shows, a lot of standouts. They have another standout happening, I believe, this week. And we also have retired FBI agent Rob D'Amico back on the show. He was a hostage rescue team guy. He was a special agent. He was ran the drones and all this. He's done a lot. He's also somebody that was a fugitive task force guy. Like, he's also been on national, what some people might even call deep state stuff, like he's on that level. And so we're going to bring both of them up. I'm really happy to have them back on the show tonight, both of them returning. Let's bring up Mizzy. Hello, Mizzy.
Hello.
How you doing? Let me get off the big screen. And we also have returning Rob D'Amico. How you doing, Rob?
Good. How are you?
Awesome. I saw you all over national TV this week for the Trump stuff. MSNBC. You were on like every. I couldn't turn it off because it was like Rob on like every segment. I'm going to keep watching if Rob's on.
I did that in the middle of my second oldest's wedding was on Monday. So between like rehearsals and things, I'd run in, I would talk. I did at like 11 a.m., a 5 p.m., a 10 p.m., a 1 a.m., and a 5 a.m., all before like the wedding the next day. So it was a bit much, but I mean, that stuff doesn't happen very often. So I think, some of the insight to me was useful to folks.
Yeah, definitely. Let's we probably could talk about that later tonight. I mean, it's just kind of an ongoing story.
Being a former FBI sniper that's worked with Secret Services, you kind of have the ins on some of this stuff.
Definitely. People have questions on it. Maybe we can talk about that. But the thing we wanted to talk about tonight was obviously Sandra Birchmore. We started off with that video. I know that we had been talking about it, and I sent you over the Case podcast that I just mentioned from Kirk Minihane, Barstool Sports. What do you think about this, Rob D'Amico, former FBI agent, hearing this podcast and the same town, Canton, Massachusetts, the same district attorney? What's your thoughts on this?
My initial thought after listening to all that was just, it was disgusting. It's disgusting and horrible. When you really get into how she got to where she was in her life at that point where she was murdered, was just deplorable. I mean, and Kurt and Dave talked about the Explorer program and the grooming that's going on, and they said it many times. It just reminded me. I grew up Roman Catholic, and it's the same thing that I see, where and we'll talk about it. Like I have 4 children that I was some parents thought I was a little bit overprotective, but this is the exact same the same reason I was overprotective, and everything they did is what brought her to her point where she ended up being murdered by a police officer, I believe, one who impregnated her, and then the other police officers who shared her and groomed her, probably starting 13, 14, or definitely 15. To me, that's the worst thing you can do in life. Children are just they're so innocent until adults get involved to a point. So it's horrible, disgusting, and it was tough to even listen to that police officers that are put out there to protect and serve put themselves in that position. As we'll go into it, they volunteer to start the Explorer program. They volunteer to be the den leaders and this and that, and they volunteer to be close to children, to have access to them when no one else is around. And that is a key point. She was 23 at the time, but it started way earlier than that.
Now, no one's been charged for her murder. They ruled it that she did it to herself. Obviously, a lot of people don't think that, and it's still being investigated. But the fact that no one's been charged for anything is kind of crazy.
It is like, and it's really going to take some work to charge someone. I think, though, we may get that out of it. I think if enough people, and it takes the people, to rise up and say, wait a second, like people have to be held accountable. And I think there may be enough in here that you could get a jury through what you have and everyone's testimony, even though you're not going to have the body do the autopsy and do all these other things. But that's what these cops rely on. And I say cops, and I'm talking about every police officer who's watching this or reads about this case should absolutely go after these guys. Like, it's time to stop protecting your own when this is happening. And it's one of those, like, 99.9% go out there and they put their lives on the line for other people. It's this other ones that are doing things outside of that you have to stop this. We're not going to talk about it. We're going to protect their own. I blame the priests that knew that another priest was molesting a child and just moved them to another parish without telling anyone. They are just as guilty because they're enabling it. They're covering it up, all because they're trying to protect the church. And it's the same thing here, that it's time to stop that. It's time to stop not saying anything.
I'm glad you said that, because I'm starting to get calls from a lot of good police, former and current, just, kind of doing what you're saying. Like, they can't obviously come out and say anything a lot of times, but they can tip us off. And it feels like it's like we see it, like you said, Irish Catholic. We also had gangs, right? And, the Italians had gangs, and it's like the code of silence. That's the whole thing. It's like, that's what infects everything. If 99% are good, but they don't say something, then it taints everything. And it just, that's the whole issue here. Is the blue line, the whole, yeah.
Yeah, I went against, I did undercover against, we talked about it, against the mob. And so many people won't talk about the mob, like, oh, they protect the neighborhood and this, that. They're also dealing heroin and drugs to underage, and they're trafficking, women. Like, oh, so your guy that you like because he's got a personality and he may clean up the street or keep, he's trafficking drugs, trafficking women, and you're standing up for him. It's time to say, well, wait a second. We can't take this little bit of good because they know what they're doing. They're buying your loyalty and pushing it out and they're doing horrible things. They're two-faced. It's the same thing. And some of these police officers, when you look at them, are doing great things here, but the second you touch a child, that all stops. That whatever good you're doing over here, it stops. And you have to like look at the big picture. It's a person who's using his power to get on a good side here, not to be looked at over here. And I look at it at the Boy Scouts too. All the people that were, using the Boy Scouts to get close to children, and like, oh, he was a great den father, you never suspected. Well, there's a reason he's doing that. It's to be close to a child. And like I said, I think there's nothing sicker in the world than harming children. They're, having four and looking at them and how innocent and helpless they are for so long. And even later on, and then to use a position of power to influence that. And the ones that join the Explorer program, they're looking for, they might have had bad, and then those are the ones they target. They target the bad family lives, the ones that have a bad family life. They're looking for a father figure or, this other figure, and you get into it, and then you use that against them, knowing that no one's going to believe them, and all the things that came up, like, when they were threatening them, like, oh, they're not going to believe you, I'm a police officer or whatever. It's just so frustrating.
Sick. I worked with young people early on. I was a school teacher, mostly a substitute teacher, but really what I was the wrestling coach, the head wrestling coach. And there's always those kids every year that certain kids would need that extra. They wanted somebody, you give them a ride home, you talk to them, you be that extra resource for them. And just to abuse that, just to be just sickening. It's like, I used to lose sleep over those kids. Like, could I do more? Like, you know what I mean? It's like, because that the home life isn't always good. Let's just put it that way. And so it's really hard to hear that kind of thing, like going on with young people. What do you think the FBI would have done? Like, would do on this? Because Mizzy and I have talked about this. Mizzy is hopeful that the FBI is investigating this, the feds. What kind of what would their approach be if they were looking at this right now, you think, Rob?
Well, I mean, and again, I love the FBI. We've made our mistakes, and I'm going to point some of it out, like the gymnast doctor, and that case was dropped by some folks. Probably not in the same context as what these police officers might have covered up, but there were mistakes made. Hopefully this whole entire thing between this and Karen Reed and everything else has opened a can of worms, so to speak, into the corruption in the area. And hopefully when you start going down these roads, all these rabbit holes come up. Hopefully they're following all of them. This one, I'm hoping that they are really, truly, because a victim is out there who is murdered and the people are just walking the street. I hope they bring the resources to this case. And they do have some unbelievable science and forensic and everything else that they can support bringing a case against who I believe, murdered her, and the ones that covered it up. Some of them you probably won't get, Davini and stuff like that may have not been involved in it specifically. Will you be able to then put anything together about some of the other victims he's had? Because there's other ones out there. Will you be able to protect them enough to bring some other justice there? But for the murder case, I hope they bring everything they can. I hope they look at it and say, this is a wrong that we have to undo and make it more right.
Mizzy, I'm sure you have some questions too. I want to make sure I'm bringing you in here.
Yeah.
Comments.
One of my biggest questions is, what are different ways the FBI could go after them? I was wondering if maybe DOJ could bring a civil rights violation case against them, and also go after Farwell for the murder. But what avenues do you think that they could go down?
It could do a civil rights, but I think it can also provide some evidence because murder is a state crime. to bring in, a better district attorney or special district attorney or some other way to bring in the evidence that they gained through their investigation to hand off to state court to actually prosecute for murder, even though it's not that one is in a federal murder type of thing, but we can still give evidence to a state prosecutor that they would come in outside of the local one to prosecute them for actually murder. So like I said, they can still gather evidence. They can do all the other things. They can interview folks. And I think the key will be, even though they're tight, is going to get one of these guys to turn on the other ones. Would be very strong. I think the doctor's autopsy in itself can stand pretty heavily on that. And you look at the video you saw. Some of it circumstantial, but it's very strong circumstances. And Kurt talked about a lot, and Dave. She was very much over communicative in everything she did. Just telling everybody, which is counter to me. It's not one of the my personalities, but for her, sharing was big. And her last text was around 9 o'clock. He showed up 9:14 was it?
Yeah,
and then she
yeah,
communicated with
she
no
was
one.
texting. Her last actual text was around 9:50. She was texting with her cousin, but she was Snapchatting with a coworker at 9 o'clock, and that went unanswered. And he showed up at 9:14.
Yeah. So when you look at that, again, it's circumstantial, but I think there's enough circumstantial evidence when you put it on top of the autopsy and hopefully some of these other statements that come out. I'm hoping that a case can come up, and that's when you want a jury that truly wants to do the right thing. And in the Karen Reed case, I was totally against putting a innocent person in jail. But now I'm like, hey, I think you have the guilty party, and you want that jury to weigh it in a way that says, yeah, we might not have the body to have the fingerprints and the DNA. Hopefully that the sex crime kit that they took, that they didn't test, but that they took, hopefully that can turn around. Let's get that into a safe area and test it correctly to see what we come up with. Did his DNA come up under her nails? Now, again, he was there, so DNA just on his DNA just on her body is a bit different. But I think, again, you're going to have to start adding all those circumstantial things and then just paint that picture. People have been convicted before without bodies. So I'm trying to think of the one where his secretary disappeared. He took her boating or whatever, and then she was gone. So there are some cases that you can bring to a jury and have enough built up to prosecute without the hardcore DNA that you're used to seeing maybe in a murder.
Kind of going along with what you just were talking about, the DNA of her, the rape kit. Sorry, and I know you don't always like to say that on YouTube. Sorry. The kit, is there, with the video that they just with the video of him coming and going and showing that he was the last person to see her alive, he refused to give his DNA, and they didn't do anything with that. They didn't go to a judge and try to get his DNA. Showing a judge that video and saying he was the last person to see her, do you think a judge, they would have had probable cause to get a warrant from a judge to get it?
Absolutely. And they still can get it. So you can still write that search warrant that makes him give his DNA. Though I would imagine, I can't imagine his DNA not being around. But yeah, you can absolutely write another search warrant to get his DNA. So I don't think that's an issue based on everything we have now. I think I can write it.
Now the AG, the Attorney General, has taken over this case, and there was some stuff going on with like the civil suit. Do you understand what was going on that last week, Mizzy, with that?
Yeah, the defendants all wanted, and the lawyer for the family all wanted basically a peek into the AG's, what's going on in the AG. They wanted basically everything from the AG, although they were saying, which I thought was kind of weird, they didn't get much from Massachusetts State Police or Morrissey's office for the lawsuit. So they were trying to get it from the AG. And I thought, I was kind of angry because I thought it was like they were trying to get a peek into what's going on, because they want to know what the FBI has on them. And the lawyer for the AG kept saying other jurisdictions are looking into this case. So they want to know what other jurisdictions have on them.
So I guess that would probably be the FBI.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Without saying it, yeah.
Yeah.
We used to call them OGA, other government agencies.
Yeah. And first they didn't want to give it up, but she ended up saying, they'll work something out, but basically give them the list of what they have, and the judge can decide what will be shared and what won't be shared.
We'll see what happens on that. We have this video that we played, the surveillance. Have you've seen this before, Rob? I'm sure, right?
Yes, a couple times.
All right, I'm gonna play it again so people can see it. What's your take on this? Like, what do you? And one of the things that I saw, and I think Kirk mentioned too, which I think is huge, is that this was during the time when COVID was going on, and Matthew Farwell, like a lot of people, didn't like masks. He didn't wear his mask. Unlike me, I wear masks everywhere. I just, I got old customers. I don't want to get them sick. I don't want them dying because of me. So he was wearing a mask in this video, which I think is just strange. If he didn't like masks, why he's wearing a mask? What do you think about the video, Rob? Do you notice anything?
So, and I do think Dave and Kurt and Dave did explain, like, some say, oh, he was walking out real fast. Well, again, if his story is that he broke up with her and it's snowing out and, his wife's, pregnant and about to give birth in 10 hours, that doesn't mean as much to me as the fact that he hated COVID masks. So all of a sudden, why is he wearing it now? Hood up. Like I normally go inside. I get it. It's snowing out. So if you notice, head down.
Yeah, head down.
So I do some things. I did some things in the bureau where you don't want your identity seen. And that's exactly what you do. You walk in, head down a little bit. You don't want to look at them. You got a COVID mask is great for hiding identity. You don't bring your hood up. Normally, if it's snowing, I come inside, I pull my hood down. So does it prove anything?
I think
No.
it's funny when you said that. I think Sandra did right there. Didn't she just pull her hood down?
Did she?
I think so. It looked like it.
So,
I don't know.
I mean,
I'll watch that again.
The key to everything and how you look at people is what the normal people do. So you think to yourself, but I didn't know him, but everyone who knew him said he was an anti-COVID guy and he wasn't about the mask. And all of a sudden, he just shows up this night, has a mask. He's driving alone. No one else is in the lobby with him, and he still has a mask on. So
Yep.
She took the hoodie off. It's
So,
that funny. That is,
so in the neighborhood I live in, we have some kids that are breaking into cars, and they all have COVID masks and hoodies on because they know everyone has a Ring camera, and they're just trying to make it so that they don't get identified. But when you also look at him, his head is down. It's not even like looking up. He knows.
Right.
He knows where that camera's at. And he knows that the only way in there, again, I'm going into places where I'm trying to conceal myself. So I know where the cameras are, and I just kind of keep my head down with the hat or hoodie on. And if you have a COVID mask, it's even better. So watch him come in because his head is purposely down.
I also think he was hunching over a little to make himself look smaller because he's a big dude.
He knows what cops look for on the cameras, and does he have gloves on?
No, they said he didn't have gloves. I can't tell.
Yeah, I didn't sew it down enough, but he looks down there. He kind of looked at it because he kind of knew it. But I don't even think that's hurrying out. Like I don't like he's walking out at a normal pace. but he also knows exactly what police officers look for when we're looking at suspicious video.
Yeah.
Like it's one of those things. Like you watch it enough, you're like, oh, watching crime scenes, you're looking like, oh, okay, this is that. So he's trying to not look suspicious, and that's my belief. Again, it's not evidence of anything, but when you start adding all of it up and you show it, and you got 12 people that like listen to the evidence, that I think would look at that and say, yeah, that is odd. Like as long as the prosecutor points that out, saying, oh, look at how everyone else enters the lobby. I'd take everyone. I would look at across the board who enters it during the snowstorm and look at hoods and come up with a percentage that take them off or whatever. Just again to reiterate, that's not the norm. People come in, take the hood off.
Yeah, it's normal. That's exactly what people do. That's what I do. I may leave the mask on because I'm worried about people, but I'm unusual to even wear the mask. Most people don't wear masks at all anymore. But at that point, I mean, the guy is anti-mask and he's wearing a mask. That's so weird. And the head down, the hood up. And also the fact that she is in the video going to clean off her car.
Yep.
Like that's not that's an indication of she was getting ready for work, right? Mizzy?
She was bringing, I think she was actually bringing, she might have cleaned her car off, but I think she was bringing it inside because they were having, it was Monday, the 1st and the 2nd is when the snowstorm went from, one day to the next. And I think most of the snow was going to happen overnight. So I think she was bringing it inside. So when she got outside, she didn't have to open her car door. Because sometimes I know sometimes when I used to drive, my car door would freeze. So I think that's why she brought it in with her. But you look when he leaves, you could see how much snow is on the ground out there already.
Some of the other things that again are going to be circumstantial or whatever. But she buys a car seat for her baby. Like, okay, if she's really thinking about like suicide, are those the things that you do? Now, again, he broke up with her, and that drove her to it, so to speak. But I also think his texts when he says, "I wish you were dead. I wish you would kill yourself." That's kind of foretelling, right? That's in his own words. I wish you were dead. I wish you'd kill yourself. Well, killing you and make it look like you killed yourself, sure comes close. So again, it's one of those things that you're going to have to take all these things, put them in front of 12 decent people and just talk to them about it and show like it and admit right up front in the opening arguments, you're not going to see some of the evidence that you may be used to seeing because you're dealing with police officers who know how to ruin a case. And those are the ones that are involved. But you look at again, like why didn't he broke up with her before? Was that on text? Was it in person? I think the estimated time in the snowstorm there and back, hour and a half, his wife's pregnant, all these other things. So this time you had to break up with her in person because it was final, but you broke up with her 3 times beforehand. And if you can get the text from that, like, well, last time you broke up with her on text, and the second time you broke, and this time you had to personally do it, so to speak. And I think I saw someone make a comment. I thought it looked like he had some gloves on, like latex gloves. I would have to slow down the video and really take a look at it. I thought there was a bit of a color change in like purple. But I didn't slow it down. But someone else I saw in the I try to read the comments, which are really tough. But his hands stay in his pockets. You want to touch as least as you can because he knows what they're going to look for in my book.
It's very well possible, and he probably took them off when he got upstairs, got to the hall, because it would be weird him walking in with gloves, but took them off and then he used them to commit the crime.
Yep. Because he knows exactly what leads to murder convictions. That odd fingerprint on the elevator thing. Again, he's there, but did he take precautions to try to not be there?
Yeah. And that's one of the things that I brought up to, I did speak to Trooper Fanning, one of the lead troopers on this case. You know, I said, he's a police detective. He would know how to cover up the case. And he said, oh, he's not a real police detective. They don't deal with murders and Stoughton. We're the one who, you know, who deal with the murders. And I'm like, but still, he would still know how to do things to cover up his crimes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And he tried to push back on me, and I said, I don't agree with you.
No, and you shouldn't, because again, if you're in law, you hear the guys who, you know, investigating homicide and everything talking about it and whatnot, and so I don't think that holds any water. You know what they look for, you know what gets them, type of thing. Because again, patrol officers, like when you're told to secure the scene, you see what they do. You're told to, you know, hey, make sure no one touches the elevator doors until we get fingerprints off it or whatever. So, you know, I just think that's, you know, that's misplaced.
Now, Attorney Betterow has said that they should fumigate the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office, and they're also the ones that passed over on doing anything on this. Do you think that's fair, Rob?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Attorney Betterow says that they should fumigate, like basically just like
So
start
when you look
over
at,
with the district attorney's office, like get rid of
when you look at
everybody.
the police department and the district attorney's office, leadership is what dictates. You know, it's like you know, some of the sports guys I listen to, and the coaches. It's a culture, and coaches come in and they change a culture of a team. And some of these coaches over 1 year can change the culture of a team and how they look at things. And I think you're looking at both the police department and district attorney's office the same way, that a culture has prevailed that has allowed this to happen. And that sometimes you have to just clean house. And one, it shows everyone the next person, you know, you bring a new person in and then you clean house and you just show them like, this is not going to be tolerated. Whatever the old boy, old gal network, whatever the old network was saying doesn't go, because we just got rid of everybody.
Yeah.
It's tough on some things, especially if it's unionized and some other things. I don't think the district attorneys are. My police department may be, but the new chief has to come in and you have to like basically sit down with the ones there and say, this is not going to happen anymore. I will not tolerate it. And you have to start documenting it and know how to fire people, how to get rid of them, to get rid of that culture. And then you start bringing in good people that have that right culture. And it's painful, but you have to do it because it's so, you know, it's so ingrained in it. But we go back to the culture of every agency has a culture, and I think every police department has a culture that actually overrides chiefs. And it's the 25-year guy, and you know, there's 10 25-year guys, and the new guys get on. Hey, this is the way we do things. And I think you know, some of it's you don't have moral courage to stand up and say no. You know it's wrong, but like you want your job, you want this. You know, you don't want to be outcast, and they do that. And that's where the whole, I mean, I love the thin blue line because they protect you, but there's another side to it that you have to really say, wait a second. These people are not, you know, I almost fault them more. Like crooks are crooks. I always dealt with the mob guys. Like they're mob guys, we're cops, and this is how we deal with it. Like FBI and mob, like they didn't try to play both sides of it. They are who they are, and we need to be who we are. The ones that play both sides of it, and that's why the mob guys hate snitches. And that's like, to me, why a cop who gives information, like we've had a senior FBI guy get arrested for spying for the Russians.
Yeah.
To me, that's worse than a Russian spy. A Russian spy is a Russian spy. He comes over, he's got a job to do, just like our CIA folks do and everything else. I don't fault him as much as the FBI guy that turns state secrets over to the Russians. He's worse, absolutely worse. He took that oath of office and he let get money or whatever, you know, or ego, like in Hansen and Ames. they're worse than Russian spies. Russian spies that's their job. So I see it the same way with police officers. Like, they're worse. And police officers should absolutely want to hammer them and say, you are ruining our reputation for, whatever, especially child predators like Davini and such. I mean, that's just, you know,
What do you think of the lead detective, trooper detective? He was a former Stoughton police officer.
Well, what's his name?
Fanning, Trooper Fanning.
So there's so many different. Hold on, I'm trying to. He wasn't the first Canton police officer on the thing, right?
No, he's
Okay.
He's a
a Massachusetts state trooper.
Yeah, he's with the district attorney's office, state trooper detective, whatever.
Oh, okay. Again, if you have any connection to the old department, recuse yourself. Like absolutely recuse yourself, because that's the biggest joke in the world, not doing that. If you have any connection to the agency that's being looked at, you have to say no. Like, again, it's one of those moral things. Like, and you saw it in the Karen Reed case too. Like, there should have been a whole bunch of recusals in there, and they didn't do it, and then it's for a reason.
Yeah, and he's the one I spoke to, and to me, it's just ridiculous. It's that he would stay on the case knowing that he was from that police department. Yeah, and we think he was there at the same time as Divine. So how can you investigate somebody you worked with?
You can't. And that's every year we'd have to take the, I don't want to say stupid, classes in the FBI about, but we'd have to take classes about conflict of interest. And they were so strict on what your conflict of interest is. If I own a stock, separately that happens to be, I got to recuse myself. But it's simple. Heck, I was in the horse racing industry, and you talk about non-recusal of things. Same thing. Like, I'm like, how do you justify doing this when you have all these connections to the people you're supposed to be looking at? So, and how do the superiors allow that to happen? That's the other thing. Whoever was above him should have known and should have said, "Oh, you're not on this one."
Exactly.
So that's where the culture of, "Oh yeah, he can do it. He's a good guy. He's a good guy." You'll hear it all left and right.
And also, the attorney general also ends up having a conflict of interest, because Robert Divine was the deputy chief, and he worked closely with the DA's office. So there's a photo of them out in public together. So it's like they should have taken her case and gave it to a different district.
So yeah, something should have been done with that. So that's where you look at some of the things that, on the federal side, where special counsels come in, so that you don't have the same conflict of interest. But in the local side, they're obviously not sticking to it as much as because even if you want a fair trial to be held up in the transparency, you don't want, like, if you win, you don't want people to say, "Oh, they only won because of this." Like, if you really have a good case, you should say, "Look, I have a connection to it. We're gonna bring someone in that has no connection, and they're gonna try the case, because when you get the conviction or the acquittal or whatever, it actually looks better for what you want." So I always look at, like, if you're not recusing yourself and there is a connection, you're not doing either side. Even if the person that you have the side with that you want to be acquitted or prosecuted, that happens, it looks tainted to begin with because of your connection. So if you want it, like, why not bring someone else in? If you think it's really true, bring another prosecutor in outside outside of that district, has no connection to it, and say, "Hey, this case is going to go through this person who has no contact as I do." and I have no input to it, even if you're the boss, he answers to someone else. Take that initiative, because even if you want it to be right, it's not going to if you have the connection. So, I mean, that's where recusal comes in, and judges and everything else.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's like in the real world too. Like when I was a financial advisor, we had to do the same thing every quarter. You got to fill out this paperwork, and it was basically no, 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 and then sometimes yes. You know, when you had some kind of conflict, you got to disclose it.
Yeah.
And if there's an issue, you take it to your boss, and your boss either says yes, no, maybe. They'll tell you what to do. Like it's just this isn't. It's all about self-disclosure, though. Like I wonder if the cops are just, checking the box every quarter, but not self-disclosing. I mean, do you think maybe
There's
that's
no
what's going on there?
accountability. Like, again, I was always worried if I didn't do something
Right.
right, if I didn't, like, especially when I was doing like contracts in the FBI, I did a lot of, approving some contracts. If I had any connection to it, I like I'm going to get in a lot of trouble because there's accountability. And some people I know on your thing is going to bitch about like FBI accountability on some things, but for the most part, like if I had any connect, there was accountability. Like you did not get away with anything. So as soon as I saw it, but that's where culture comes in. If you have all the old guys saying, don't worry
Yeah.
about it, like I had to do a financial disclosure every year. I had to say everything I had, and I had 4 kids, so it's not like I had a lot of investments, but everything I had to do a financial disclosure because of the spies that got caught because they were taking money and such. But I thought like if I lied on it, there was going to be consequences. But if the old guys told me, and I was new, hey, don't worry about that, kid. They're never going to check. Just let it go. Don't then that's the culture that permeates the accountability side. And if they're not following up on it, then and I doubt a small department like that would really be following up on some of the accountability things.
Mass State Police should be, though, I would think.
Should be. But well, I mean, look at the Karen Reed, because Proctor was a mass trooper, right?
Yeah.
He had his supervisors on when he's calling her like the worst word you can call a woman.
Fanning was in that chain. Fanning was part of that chain.
Yeah. The lead
was the
state
first one
police
I've
guy
seen,
was
right?
in on it.
Yeah. So it's a culture there.
So and that's where we talk about like and to turn a culture. I always say it's like steering the Titanic. So when I got an FBI under Louis Freeh, there was a culture, and he actually cleaned up and it was all law enforcement about like booze on the job. And he said there's zero tolerance. If you get caught in a bureau car or whatever, you're gonna be fired. And he changed the culture. And he came from a bureau. He was an agent before, and it was this big thing. And then after 9/11, when Mueller came in, he said, "Hey, look, our number one priority is going to prevent terrorism acts like 9/11." Which you think, oh yeah, that's got it. We had older agents say, it's a fad, it'll go away. And like, what? Like 9/11 just happened. The new director saying our mission is to prevent, and these old time agents that were like, oh no, we investigate crimes after they happen, like, oh, it'll go away. That's a culture that took a long time to shift because they came in this way. This is the way they've always done it. This new guy is not going to tell me how to do things. This is the whatever badge you're under is the way we do it. Chief will go away. It's always said, like, if you had a bad special agent in charge, he'll be here 2 years. He's off to another job. We're going to keep doing it our way. He'll go away. But that's the culture that you're going to have to change. And it's tough. And in a department like this, with all the old time, cops that are under there that learned under whatever, that's what you're seeing with this.
Now you talked about the culture. They used to drink at the FBI. Is that
So
what
I
you
mean,
said?
it was one of those things. It was just in law enforcement. I mean, it's one of those like yeah, they did.
I think so
like,
different back in the day because I used to deliver beer like through college for, with
Uh-huh.
Teamsters. And the old timers would tell us, like, we used to get a drink at every stop, but it was a Coca-Cola, And once in a while, like, you go to a place and it was like Hell's Angels run, let's say, and they would try to offer you a beer. And the old timers would say, don't take it, don't take it. But back in the day, they would tell us that at every stop, guys would drink. So guys were driving these trucks, and at every stop, they would have a friggin' free beer at every stop. And obviously, that changed at one point. There was a cultural change where they said, no more drinks. You can take a Coca-Cola, you can take a free lunch if they offer you free lunch. But you cannot take a beer at that stop, at any stop where you're
So
delivering.
you talk about the culture. When I was in high school to college, I would come home between the Marine Corps and stuff in the summers. And a buddy of mine, Russ, if he's listening, he did construction, and I would get I would get the simple jobs like roofing. But at 10 a.m. when the liquor store would open, someone would go get, they were called ponies, 7-ounce beers.
Oh,
And
yeah.
they go get a few cases of them, and they throw them on ice. And I'd be roofing at 18, 19 years old, just drinking on a roof. But that was the culture. Like and then you got done with work and you went to the bar. And then you drank, and then you got up the next morning at 6 a.m. and you were back on the, roof. Someone got beer at 10. So the culture is different. But back in the day, from what I heard, like the Bureau, like you got done with work, you had some beers, you talked about it, and then you drove home, and you're driving, Bureau cars. But again, that was the late 80s and early 90s. And that's when people came in. And in the Marine Corps, I was in the Marine Corps. You went to the officer club every Friday night. If you weren't there, your battalion commanders like, where's so-and-so? And you drank. And if you didn't drink, they'd be like, why aren't you drinking? And everyone's driving home. Like it was a culture thing. But that was what, early 90s. And that started changing. People started getting DUIs, and then later on, if you got a DUI, you weren't getting promoted. So it's, again, changing the culture. It takes a long time, because the Marine Corps has been drinking since 1776 when we were formed in a bar. That was the culture. And if you weren't in it, they wanted to know why. What was wrong with so-and-so? Why isn't he here, drinking? So it's just going aggressively. So that's the whole thing when you look at culture and where we've gone to where we are now. But some of these departments are less inclined to change.
Yeah, look at it's funny too, because we mentioned the drink, and someone said that's the culture in Canton. I mean, it seems like we talked about it, the fireball shots, and just like everything around the Canton police and the state police. It seems like it's all drinking. It's all drinking. They drink a lot.
It's a rough, not to make an excuse, but it's a rough life on some of it. When some of the things they see and have to do whatever, and then the camaraderie of having a beer over and talking about it.
Stress relief.
It is, and it's a dangerous, slope type of thing. I'm not going to say I don't do it now, but I love to have a drink and talk about things with guys. It's just a different time and place that how you do it from now on.
Yeah, you get the adrenaline. I mean, I think in life a lot too, like with performers too, like they have this problem, especially if you're like, at a rock band playing in front of 30,000 people, you get these adrenaline rushes, and then you're all alone in a hotel room. So you go from like the ultimate high to like the low. It's just up and down. I think there's a lot of that law enforcement.
I used to work security in college at concerts, as a bouncer at a bar, work security at concerts. And this was 85 through 89. And a few of the shows we worked were Motley Crue. And have you guys seen the movie? Was it Dirt?
Dirt. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely true. Like, I've worked their hotel parties, and getting them to not throw furniture out the windows was the biggest thing. But what went on, it was that movie, absolutely 100%.
No doubt.
But it is the culture of that time. I think it's changing to a point. I don't know how some of them survived it, but they did. But but it's one of those things that like the culture of it there has to be almost a dramatic shift to really cause that. And hopefully for Canton in this area, maybe this is it. Maybe this is the shift that takes place.
I don't know. It's funny you
because
bring up Motley Crue because I think about Chris Albert too, just like Vince Neil. When I was in college, I ran into him. MTV Spring Break. I was in college. I was at Spring Break. I was on camera. You know, they put the camera in front of you in the crowd. So, anyways, we're at the hotel lobby afterwards. We're just hanging. We're college kids. We're just like, trying to find the cheap drinks. And all of a sudden, we're in the hotel lobby, no cover, not like a big club or anything. It's a hotel lobby. It's a nice place, but all the celebs are there. And this was after he got the drunk driving thing. After he killed somebody. Him and Pauly Shore were like kicked us out of the hotel lobby bathroom because they were doing stuff in there. You know what I mean? Like he got in a fight with his brother and his bodyguard because he wanted to drive and he was wasted. So I mean, a lot of people, they just don't learn. I don't, it's just unfortunate.
Like
Even
you look
when
at
you have
some of them,
tragic.
like I think down in Miami, some of the NBA guys that have gone out and been drunk and hit and killed someone, and you're like, you're making how much, and you're like, you don't have a driver. Like, are you crazy? Like now, Uber wasn't big back then, but still having a driver. But after this, remind me to talk to you offline about the Vince Neil story because I can't say it on this one. But again, it's like when you start looking at accountability, and people started following, the DUI laws because accountability, and that's where it comes in. And everything down the road is sometimes people can't follow the rules if they don't think they're going to be held to any standard. And that's, again, when you're a police officer and you don't think you're going to be investigated and like the cop that showed up, the Canton cop that was the first on the scene. Do I think he thought that another cop killed her? Probably not. But if someone has, pulled him in the ear and said, hey, look, she was going out with so-and-so, just let's get this done quick. Do you think they're going to really like investigate it hard? No, that's going to be the thin blue line. Like, yeah, we'll get through this type of thing. I can't say that all the people that involved knew exactly what happened. But
there's actually a rumor about
that.
There's actually a rumor that I've tried to run down many ways and I've had it is police officers who told my source, two different sources, that because there were 5 Canton police officers who went to the scene, that 3 of the 5 reported to their boss that they didn't agree with what Massachusetts State Police was saying. And 2 officers of the 5 are no longer with the PD. And I wonder if they were part of that. And some people think that an officer actually went to the FBI about her case.
It may have.
There's this. I've had these sources come to me. Yep. They actually heard it from Canton police officers. So that makes me wonder a little bit more if that's the case.
It could be like those underlying rumbles. I was 2 things on some of it. When horrible things happen, people want to have a fond memory of what they did about it. I'm not saying in this case, but when you look back at it, you don't want to be the guy that like, I didn't see that or whatever. But if you're getting those rumblings from police officers who are being candid with you, there really is a lot to say. And the FBI, if we have a police officer come to us and say that means a lot, because that's not an easy walk between the PD and FBI at all, because you're basically about to throw your career away in my book. But then again, the murder of a young woman that you think is being covered up, if that doesn't get you off it, I'm not sure what does. I mean, that's where moral courage comes in. And if someone did that, they really do have moral courage to do the right thing, and they should be rewarded and not, fired, so to speak.
And something else I want to mention about the Canton police, because they only handled the initial call.
Yep.
And they helped get the video. But when there were 5 Canton police officers who ended up at the scene after, 3 initially, and then 2 more were called in, a detective and Sergeant Lank, and they all in their reports say something different for the ligature that was tied around her neck. One said a scarf, one said a strap. One said what another officer said, like Lank as the supervisor, he's writing the report as the supervisor, and he says one of the officers told him this, and it wasn't even what that officer wrote in their report, and none of them match. And I also thought it was weird that Sergeant Lank didn't put what he saw. He was saying what another officer saw, because he actually did see her after when he was called to the scene. So their reports are weird. I just don't understand how 5 police officers can see this young woman, and none of it's consistent of what the ligature was made of.
I see that as too, like, and I think they talked about it in that podcast. What is really bad policing and what is like covering up? So I'm like, why would they all have different, like, again, I don't think the initial thing was that this other cop killed her. Like,
Yeah.
like I don't think those guys probably knew, like the ones showing up probably didn't know about the affair and all the other things going on. So why would they have all these different things if they really thought she killed herself that way? Was it lazy that they didn't pay attention and they're like, oh, what was that again? And they just did a lazy report. Because when you look at, like, again, the Karen Reed case, I think some of it was just really bad police work investigating and being told, like, oh, like, just, this is what happened, just go with it type of thing. And then it's by police work and the investigation to follow up. So this one I really have to look at, like, a police officer should know, like, you don't put in a report what someone told you. That's called hearsay. And that doesn't even stand in trial. So as a police officer, you should know that, and you don't put that in. Like, I didn't observe the neck, but I did this, this, and this. So I don't like, I that's the first time I heard that. Like, why would they have different things in there? I'm not sure. And I would have to look at when those police reports were written. Were certain ones written right after, or all of them written right after, or were some of them written later when someone said, hey, this is what you need to put in yours?
I think they were all written fairly soon.
Yeah.
I know at least some of them were, because we were looking at it. I was looking at it recently with someone, and I think most of them were they weren't, like months later or weeks later. I think most of them were. I would have to look.
And I would put that up to almost like bad police work, where they didn't observe it. Like, oh, what did she, like, what'd she hang herself with? Like, and he, like, oh, it's a scarf or something. And he puts it in. Like, I can't, again, that's assuming that they didn't understand the relationship that she had with a police officer type of thing. Like, they didn't get that. And I don't think that probably would have transferred between the towns unless they were like friends out on the side. Cause I think some of them did go to high school together, but to me, some of that may be lazy policing where you didn't really see it, but you're going to write this in your report, so to speak, or like, hey, what are you asking someone else what they put in? But again, what someone was told and that person didn't put it in, I'd have to look a bit more into it. But yeah, it's odd. It's just like, you always have to try to separate in things like this. What is just bad, lazy investigation and what is really part of a quote conspiracy? And then I think the mix of that is someone being told, put this in your report because whatever reasons, and they don't understand that it's part of a conspiracy, but it is also bad policing. So I think there's three things: bad policing, a true conspiracy, and then the blend where you just do something because you're told, not understanding it's part of a conspiracy.
Well, it's also like, if along those lines, it's odd that the supervisor wouldn't look at the officer that he's quoting. he wouldn't look at that officer's reports to see what that officer actually wrote to say the right thing.
So there's that, and then there's the culture of knowing that no one's going to check it.
Yeah.
So it's one of those, like, understanding that there's no accountability when we talk about that. So like you would never do that in our reports. But if you ever got caught, you knew that there's consequences to that.
Yeah.
So here, they obviously, in order to blatantly put that in a report, know that it's not going to be looked at, and even if they did, no one's going to be held accountable. So I think it's a step in that direction where the culture is like, yeah, whatever, like, this will go in, doesn't matter, it's a suicide, no one's going to look at it. Some young chick, even if they find out like later, like she had an affair and was pregnant by a police officer, then I can see them, if they're told to do something, doing it thinking that they're just keeping the thin blue line, so to speak.
They found out fairly early that she was dating a married police officer.
Yeah, I'm trying to, like, it was fairly early. So again, when I look at, okay, the first initial officers there, when did they actually write their report? Because it was early that they found out. And then if it was someone dictating what should be in the reports because of that, then you start getting into that blend of bad police officer, police duties, and conspiracy getting blended, so to speak. One guy, knowing she was pregnant by another police officer, telling people what to put in a report so it looked good, but it didn't even match. So it doesn't even look good. And that's where I go into the culture of, do they really care like what's in a report, knowing like, oh, it'll blow off and I'm not going to, even if it's wrong, I'm not going to get in trouble.
Yeah.
Now,
which is horrible. It's a young woman who was murdered. I mean, or not even at that point, if they really thought she committed suicide, it's a young woman, she deserved more. She deserved more from Stoughton Police Department. She deserved more from Canton Police Department. And she sure as heck deserved more from Massachusetts State Police and Morrissey's office, because they were the ones who should have got these guys convicted or at least charged.
My absolute thing is, every time you deal with a victim, you think of it as one of yours, one of your children, one of your loved ones, and you will handle it differently. I can't profess that enough. Like, I always looked at it that way. I had 4 children. I have 4 children. And I always look at, well, if this was my child or my loved one, my parent, whatever, how would I want this to be done? And that has to drive you. Now, I didn't get too many comments, but I got one saying I'm being overly cautious on this.
I don't think you have been tonight.
I
thought you were pretty. I thought you went further than I expected.
I've been thinking, like, I'm going to get some, like, I don't want to say heat, but I'm like,
no, I think you were more cautious actually when you were talking about the Karen Reed stuff last time. Like tonight, I don't think, who's saying that?
So Jane H. Rob is being quite cautious on this one. Question. Unless that's sarcasm. If that's sarcasm, then I got you.
I don't know.
I
think there's always one person wrong out there. So, yeah.
Jane, let me know if that's what you meant, or if I'm really being sorry.
You even got one of the trolls, like a good troll. This is Joe Biffle. He trolls me every time in a good way. He's funny. He calls me, makes fun of my hair, but he said, "You're excellent, sir." Like that's like I'm surprised you even got that from Joe Biffle. So you're doing all right.
So, I'm hoping that, like, I hope she answers back and says if she's being sarcastic or not. Because I'm like, I'm kind of going like, this is one of the ones I truly believe there has to be an event that really changes things. And as we look at everything, I start looking at all the police videos of how people are encountered by police officers. And I see ones that I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe this cop's doing this. Like it's an overreach. But then again, I see some people that I'm like, if I was that cop, how was this guy controlling himself with the subject? And it is a both-sided equation type of thing. but certain things do have to change, and people that don't want to change, I think, are stuck. That you have to admit on both sides of cops use their power. I wasn't ready for a gun and a badge at 22 years old. I mean, I was in the Marines, I was bouncing, I was working security at concerts. I did not need a gun and a badge at that time. The Bureau always hires people a bit later in life. And I think part of it is maturity when you get there and what you're supposed to do, that you come to an understanding. And from the first days I was in the Bureau to the last days, I did things differently based on what I saw and experienced. So it is a big job to have a gun and a badge at a young age. And that's where, though, a good mentor shapes you and how you deal with that gun and badge. And I think that we constantly have to evolve to what it's like. And part of it is some of the first protests when Black Lives Matter came up. What case was that?
George Floyd.
Oh,
No,
Trayvon Martin.
Yeah,
Yes.
Trayvon.
So it
Trayvon
was one of those where I thought, well, all lives matter. And it wasn't, it was just one of those things like, yeah, everyone's lives matters. But I also realized that all lives matter was a put down on the Black community saying, well, all lives matter. And then a cousin of mine, I won't name him, just he's Black and he married my cousin, and just a phenomenal guy. And he's raised phenomenal kids. And we sat down over a bourbon one time. He might have had scotch, I had bourbon. And he said, I had to teach my kids, like when they get stopped by a police officer, how not to get shot. And I looked at myself and I'm like, wow, I'd never have taught my kids that. I try to talk to them how about maybe get out of a speeding ticket. You don't say you weren't doing this and all, but I've never had to sit down and tell them not how to get shot. And I realized at that point, there was something I would never see. It's like one of my female kids that they worry about, like walking in a parking lot and getting raped.
Yeah.
And don't mean to sexually assaulted. I'm never going to walk out in a parking lot and think that's going to happen to me. Now, if I go to prison, different story. But it's one of those things that you can't get into your mind if you come from a certain thing, that you really have to start looking. When we talk about dealing with how you want your loved ones to be dealt with, that I think if every police officer out there starts going and says, okay, if I'm walking up to a car in the middle of the night, how would I want my child to be dealt with by this police officer, which is me coming up to it? And I think that solves most of the issues if you truly can do that, but it's tough. It is tough on many different levels.
I had the talk when I was a child from my father. As you can see, my handle is a mixed girl in a mixed up world. It's my show. And it's called The Talk, that all Black kids, or most Black kids, get from their parents, how to navigate in the world.
I would never even have thought of that. It's amazing. I understand it though. Now, like I said, I was talked to, and from someone I trust and loved, and I was like, wow, it just opened my eyes to a point. But then also you see, going back to Sandra, like here's this person that joins Explorers that is looking for that role model, that's looking for something in her life, probably a positive male figure, adult figure, authoritative figure that goes into this, and that's used against her. And then they and then they pass her around. And the guy who goes into the dog program that uses animals to get to that. Like, you talk about the dredges of society, and they're in powers, and then they're in powers. He goes on to be a police officer. But then it's the other ones that stand on the side. Like, remember, what was the case in Penn State? The assistant coach, Sandusky?
Yeah,
Sandusky, Jerry Sandusky.
Okay. So I always looked at it. There was lots of complaints about that, but there was one former quarterback who was like 6'5" or something along, a big guy. and he was an assistant coach.
Yep.
And he walked into the locker room and heard
Oh.
noises that sounded like a boy and Sandusky doing things. And I'm like, why did you not walk in and end that? Like, to me, it would be a personal beating. How could you ignore that? You knew what it was. And don't shame yourself. Don't try to say you didn't. You knew what it was. You're 6'5", 250 pounds. You could have ended that and put a stop to all of it. And you didn't have the moral courage to do something at the time or later to go and talk to somebody. That's moral courage that you have to stand up with. And as much as they say, oh, he's a good guy, no, like, you're not. If you can't stand up for a child that you think is being abused or what treated the wrong way in any case, you have a duty and obligation to just humanity to do something about it. And that's where moral courage of when you see things going wrong in your department or whatever, to stand up and say, wait, this is not right. And that's why if a police officer went over the FBI, absolutely, that was a tough walk, but he did the right thing.
Now, these Explorers programs, I've seen a lot of headlines about a lot of abuse, not just with Sandra and not just with this specific town police Explorer program. It seems like there's, like you mentioned earlier, the Catholic Church, the Boy Scouts. There seems like certain places where there are issues with children and programs, and Explorer programs seem to be one of those places. How, if you're a parent or an educator or someone in power, maybe a police officer, like a police chief, how do you make sure this stuff isn't going on with the Explorer programs?
So when they did when the case did the episode just on the Explorers, I was horrified. I heard about them a little bit, type of thing. But as soon as I started hearing about it, I was horrified at the extent of it. And if you haven't listened to it, listen to it, because it is one of those things that really now has to come out. But it's like the Roman Catholic Church, and it's like the Boy Scouts. Now, my second oldest, Russell, joined the Scouts, and all his friends, and he had a great group of friends, were in the Scouts. I was never home. I was always overseas or doing something. And one of the other fathers of the boys was the den dad, or whatever they call him.
Scout master.
And we did one time. I was at it was an event, and I was sitting there with one of his friends' moms, and I looked up at the stage, and there was all a bunch of the adult males that are in charge of this whole region. And I looked up there, and there had to be like 40 guys up there. And I just looked over at her and I said, you do know, like 5 of them are probably pedophiles. Another 10 of them are probably thinking about it and whatever. And she looked at me and said, how do you think like that? And I said, how do you not? I know I see the bad part of life, but people who are after children put themselves by children. I never trusted a coach that was a coach of a team that didn't have kids on the team. I didn't trust anybody who was trying to get closer to children that didn't have a reason to, even the ones that they did have a reason. One time we went out to it was a sleepover from like Friday to Sunday. And the first night, the den dad comes back and says, hey, we have to stand fire. Kids have to stand fire watch. And I said, okay, me and Russell will stand at like midnight to 1. He goes, well, they want the children to stand fire watch with the adult that's not their parent. And I looked at him. I said, was it the pedophile rule? Like, are you kidding me? You want my son to stand fire watch in the middle of the night with an adult that I don't know and he doesn't know? 2, you want me to stand fire watch with a child that if they say something, I did something, that I'm going to lose my job. And he, what do you want me to do? I said, I want you to go back in there and yell at, like, okay, who's the pedophile that made this rule up? But I end up standing from 12 to 1, and my son was with me. And then from 1 to 2, which was the other watch, I stood it with Russell. And it was one of those things that I just didn't want to fight it, but I wasn't going to go on either side of it. But who thinks along those lines? Like 99%, yeah, it's fine, but that 1%, like someone has put that out there to be close to a child without other adult supervision, and who's not standing up for that? And but it's always these people, they put themselves in a position of trust and confidence without other adult supervision, that they're in a power of authority, and then once that it happens, they use that authority to say who are they going to believe. And if you're not looking out for your child, no one else is. It's one of those things. And I'm sorry, like I said, I came off to the other parent, like, how do you think like that? How do you not? But in her case, I mean, and I'm not sure time frame when she lost her mom and grandmother, but she joined this program to better herself, to get to a point where she had something, and the people with the trust and confidence. And he started that program. It's not like those urges just came after.
Right.
He knew what he was doing to begin with. And every one of these people that they do that from the get-go. Get in a position next to children where you're not supervised and you're in a position of authority over them. And people who figure it out that don't say anything are almost just as guilty.
And he did 3 things where he was around children. He was an SRO officer.
Yeah.
He had an after-school program at the school where it was like an open gym program. And then he did the Explorers. And also, to blow your mind, I don't know if you know that the Explorers is an offshoot of the Boy Scouts.
I learned that. Yeah, I figured that out. But
how do you protect the kids though that don't have, because like when I was coaching, like I said, the kids that need you the most are the kids without the parents. Like they're, the parents aren't around. Like, so, the kids that have the great parents, it's not even a question that they usually don't need an adult. You know what I mean? Like they've got all this stuff going on with their family. So they don't need like that personal, attention. Like, and someone that's not safe is going to pick up on that, and they're going to take advantage of the kid that doesn't have the parents around. So how do we protect those
Can
kids?
I add something to that before you answer?
Yeah.
And also take like Sandra, her mom thought she was doing the right thing. She thought the safest place she could be sending her child was with the police. Like most people don't think the police would do this to a child. And that her mom wrote a note to Robert Devine thanking him, saying, "Thank you for looking out for my daughter." She did not know what was going on, and it's insane that the people that she thought would protect her child are the ones who did this to her child.
And I would have thought that too before hearing that. Like I said, I hadn't heard of all the abuse in the Explorer program. I really it was so gut wrenching to hear that coming out. Because same thing, I come from law enforcement community, so I just think better. I don't like it's one of those things. I have real harsh agreements with the Roman Catholic Church and how they dealt with it. Again, the priest that moved another priest that was knowingly doing it, I think is just as guilty. The Boy Scouts, same thing. They knowingly covered things up and covered for each other. And to have half of them have, kids in those scout programs, and they're doing it and letting other kids, but I didn't know about the Explorer program. And that's, I guess, my ignorance that pedophiles are in every facet of life. It's one of those things. I don't know how. Like, there's a lot of programs in the FBI that deal with this stuff, and they have to take. I did psychological tests to do undercover, do the hostage rescue team, but we now have a program for undercover, like child, violence against children people that do the online stuff. Because that's one thing I could never do in the bureau, was that kiddie porn, child abuse. Having 4 kids, I couldn't do it. So I applaud the ones that can. But they always say that the people that do this are getting They're putting themselves in that position, and almost every one of them, they're not described as creepy. Like, oh, I would have never known he was the best guy with the child, and he is. They know how to groom.
They
They know
know
how
how
to
to do
get
it.
there. They know how to do it. They're just evil people that put himself into that position to do that. And I don't. Again, like you think her mom thought she was doing the right thing, putting her in the police program. Like it's one of those. And then here it is, the worst abuse that you've seen. They're passing around. They're using her, and it affected the rest of her life, and it ended her life because of what she got into with them. And it's just I, I don't know. I just didn't trust anyone with my kids. Sorry. And also though, like I never drove the babysitter home alone either. Like I didn't do it because I couldn't have someone say, there's some on the other side of things, people that claim something that doesn't happen for whatever reasons too. So I never either I brought one of my kids to drive the babysitter home, or my wife did at the time. Like that was just it because I didn't want that anything to be out there on either side of it. So it was one that double-edged sword where you just kind of protect yourself and how you do things.
I wonder if there's almost like any way to screen. Like the FBI, I'm sure does a lot of screening to make sure someone's not, like you said, a spy for a foreign country.
So
I just wonder if
the
there's a way
thing
they
is,
could screen these people to
yeah,
detect it.
there's lots of screenings out there, and it's funny when I did undercover, they came up with some screenings that really surprised me, and they were very true. But when you look at people like Ames and Hansen and everything else, when you look at it, they know what you want the answers to be. So, I mean, some of those tests that I took for it were like 8-9 hours, and they ask you so many different ways to do something. But I don't know if they can get that. Like, I don't know what that screening would be because, have you ever thought about children in your dreams or whatever? Someone's going to go, no. Like, it's the other way that they look at introvert, extrovert, and how you do things. There's those questions aren't quite the same. And I truly also think like sociopaths, they can't be screened for stuff because they don't have certain feelings. You can't polygraph them. I would love, a test to come out, but I don't think they're going to. But it is. I just don't. I always look at like if you're in a position and you don't even have a children, like if you don't have a child on the team,
Right.
I absolutely like. Why are you coaching then? And there's probably some good people out there that want to like pass on their experience or whatever. Sorry, I'm not taking that risk. I only have like my child only has one life growing up, and I'm not taking that risk. And I know again, some other parents looked at me a little bit different, and unfortunately, like it happens. Even with I've had instances with a child in this regard that I just feel bad that I didn't see it and notice it. But it happens. So, and it was a boyfriend. Like, so I can't, you can only do so much, but you just got to constantly be looking and you have to like have your kids have that trust and confidence to talk to you about something no matter what. Not that they always will, because it still doesn't happen. But they have to know that they're not going to be, yelled at or whatever, or told that you don't believe them, so to speak. And I do think, though, unfortunately, the pedophiles go for the weak ones, and I mean that in the Bad Family Life and everything else. One of my favorite shows, Ray Donovan. If you look at it, like the priest that abused the one brother on there, he actually ended up abusing the other ones. It's one of those things that it was a bad family life that allowed him to think he could get away with it because they didn't have anyone to go to. The father figure wasn't there, so to speak. And that's again, they go for the weakest one that they can see. They know what to go for.
And in Sandra's case, not only just, her mom was sickly, she had a lot of health problems. She did have family in her household that loved her and cared for her and kind of took her in too. But she looked like she was, I'm trying to say this in a delicate way. When she was 13, she looked like she was 9. When she was 15, she looked like she was like 11, 12. When she was 23, she looked like she was 17. So even after going into adulthood, she still was tiny. She was very petite and she looked very, very young. So for these guys, if they didn't go after another child, they still had Sandra because she looked like a child.
True. Yeah. Yeah. It's and they have a target. They have what they're looking for, and her young looks like they probably maybe even like them younger, and she looked younger. It just I don't understand it at all. So and trying to prevent it really takes a lot of work, and but they all are smart predators, and they try things. There's trials, like everything they do, they've tried beforehand. And I got into it. Like Jimmy Rice was a 7-year-old boy who went missing when I first got down to Miami office in 1995, and he basically was his parents went up to West Palm Beach for the weekend. His older brother was supposed to come home, and his bus stop was like 30 yards from his house, and he disappeared. And it was a migrant worker who basically pulled up to him, pulled out a gun, told him to get in a car, ended up, molesting him and killing him. But that wasn't the first time. Like, you just don't go up to a child coming off the bus, pull a gun until you get in the car. Everything is, they work up to it.
They escalate.
They'll pull up to a kid off a bus stop and say, "Hey, how are you doing? Blah, blah, blah." See how it goes. Now, I used to constantly, and gosh, my kids might be in therapy over some of this, but if you saw the car with you remember the stick figures with the families and the names and the dog?
Yes.
And I'm like, the friends I saw, I'm like, why are you giving predators information on your child? Because you always tell a child, don't go with the stranger. Well, I forget, there's one of those Dateline 48 Hours did a thing where they knew like the mom and the brother's name and stuff. And they pull up to a child who'd been warned not to go with strangers and say, your mom, Sandra, had to take your brother, Michael, to the hospital. Your dog Spot is at home, and I got to take you home so that you can feed Spot. And every one of those kids got in the car. And when they pulled them out to interview him, they said, well, not to go with strangers. Why'd you go with this person? It's like, well, he wasn't a stranger. He knew my mom's name, my brother's name, and my dog's name. Yeah. So when you put, I would look at those and say, you're giving information to these predators because they know exactly what to do with it. Exactly what to do with it. They use it, but they don't do it they don't initially do it. They'll test it. They'll test it once, they'll test it twice, and they keep going further and further in that. And that's probably same thing with these cops. In the Explorer program, they probably tested a little bit where if they got caught, they could say, "Oh, I was just being nice. I was just commenting on how her hair looked." And then if she doesn't tell anyone, they go to the next step. And next time, maybe they touch their hair, like, "Oh, let me fix your hair for you." If they don't tell anyone, then they go further. So when you have those conversations with your kids, you have to really, because they don't know that something's being done to them that's not really right. And they have to be open with you. And so you have to ask, not just, "Hey, is anyone, they always say, "Oh, if anyone touches your private parts, you tell me. And these are your private." Well, that may not be the first thing. Like, has anyone touched your hair? Has anyone done this? Has anyone done
Giving you a
that?
back massage, or
Yeah.
complimented how sexy you are.
Yeah. Is anyone's like a grown man should not be telling a 12-year-old that she looks really good that day.
Exactly.
Like, that's just not appropriate. So in asking
How do
those
you
questions,
teach your kids what's appropriate? Because that's a tough conversation too, without
so
kind of freaking them out.
it's one of those with my oldest. We like if Oprah had a show on about it was about people that they predators that had like dungeons and stuff in their houses, and it was like really sick like type of things. But they had done, and I watched it, and I said, well, when do we tell our oldest that not everyone in the world wants the best for them? Like that's a conversation because kids are so innocent and they think the best of people. When do you have that conversation?
Can I actually answer that?
Yeah.
Going back to the conversation we had earlier, my father, the talk, my father sat down with me when I was little, because it was before my other brother was born, or he was just born, and I was like 7. And he was reading the Dr. King biography to us. It was for children. And they were, saying mean things to Dr. King. And I asked them, why are they saying those things? And he said, well, and he had this conversation with me. And he told me that you're a Black woman, and, people might treat you differently. And this is why. And he really went through it. And as a 7-year-old, I got it. He didn't go like, there's things that he told me as a 10-year-old and a 15-year-old and a 18-year-old more in depth. But children are smart. If you actually sit down and have an honest conversation with them without being too graphic, kids will get it.
I think you hit the nail on the head. It's progressive. It is telling them one thing that they can understand at 7, and then something at 10, and then at 18, you really have that, like, so it is progressive. And it was one of those, I always push the Gavin DeBecker book, Gift of Fear, because it talks about predicting violence and how you, and it really goes into some of the violence against women. And he was that everyone who said that they got attacked in that book said, I never saw it coming. And then he reviews what they say and says, well, this wasn't right. This, you didn't know that you do
red
this
flags,
right.
basically red flags, right?
But society tells them to be polite, like not to be rude. And I always said, don't worry about being rude to a stranger. So, and the one thing in the Gavin DeBecker, he talks about that this woman comes into, it's a walk up, like I think a 2 or 3 story apartment thing, and she sees a guy who's in there looking at a mailbox, and then she's carrying these grocery bags, and he says, oh, let me help you up with them. And she goes, no, I got it. He goes, no, I can't let you walk up the flight of stairs with those. Let me help you up. So, not being rude, lets her, walk her up. And then it gets to the door. She's hesitant to open the door in front of him. He goes, I'll help you in. And she really saying that something isn't right, but again, didn't want to be rude, lets him in the house. And then he attacks her for days. And it's a horrible scene. She wakes up one time, he's asleep on the couch, and she has a feeling, if I don't leave right now, I'm not going to live. And she sneaks past him and gets out. And she was the only survivor of this guy. He'd done it before and killed all his victims. And when he talks to her, they go through the scene that when she came in, something wasn't right. Well, he was in front of a mailbox that was actually an empty mailbox. No one had lived in that apartment. All these other things that she had seen that didn't make sense, but didn't want to be rude. And then when she got to her door, she had a bad feeling, but he just helped her up with the bags. Again, didn't want to be rude, so allowed that. And again, the perpetrators know this. And I always tell my kids, do not worry about being rude. If you have a bad feeling, you have a bad feeling for a reason. You might not know why. If you read Gladwell's book, Blink, it talks about that subconscious
We pick it
good
up.
and bad is a really good book too. And matter of fact, Gladwell and DeBecker go back. They quote each other at times, but it's one of those things. Like, you have a bad feeling, don't worry about, like, you don't owe this stranger anything about being polite. Sorry, you have something bad feeling, act on it, because there's something in your body that you can't even put into words, but it's telling you. So it's the same thing like when you tell your children, like if you have a gut feeling coming to you type of thing, and not saying in this case it would have helped, but if Sandra had come back and her mom really cared enough, then she wanted to do this and she started talking about this, and not everyone would have believed them, and she probably would have just had to pull her out of the police, explorer program if she. But still, it's one of those things that you have to insinuate to your kids, like, hey, look, if you have a bad feeling, you got to tell me, and you're not going to be wrong. Like bad feelings are bad feelings. Tell me about it. But the quizzing questions is not always just did someone touch your private parts. It's other things that are in there, type of thing, and they don't want to tell on friends, parents, and stuff like that. But they have to feel secure enough, and you have to maybe not accuse someone, but pull them out of the situation that they put them in.
That's why a lot of parents tell little girls, especially, I mean, it goes to any child, but if you're at a family function and your child doesn't want to hug someone, tell them it's okay. Yeah. Because there's a reason they don't want to hug. They're trying to allow their body space to have its own space. Let them be like that. They're not trying to be rude. Just say to, I mean, as a parent, you can even say, oh, she doesn't like hugs, or he doesn't like hugs. Because sometimes the parent doesn't know that that's creepy uncle who's tried to hug her too much. A parent doesn't know this always. So if your child goes with their intuition and they want to protect their space and their body, don't force your child to hug,
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And there's like you said, there's a reason there's a reason they have that feeling, and you can't discount it. You can't do whatever. And you never say, well, you have to kiss so-and-so, you have to hug so-and-so, you got to do this. It's one of those things that, because again, there's so much even involved in the family and stuff. Kids have a very good intuition.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
We get a question about this. Another scandal from back in the day. They're asking, do you know about Boston Police Department's Boom Boom Room?
I'm afraid to ask. Okay, what is Boom Boom Room?
These guys had an after-hours like club brothel. Police officers, Boston Police Department. They were involved in all kinds of stuff. I think the feds actually got them.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah, yeah. I just, again, I just can't stand anyone who doesn't treat other people like they're, that they want their family and loved ones to be treated, and then throw a badge on and do it anyhow. It's just, like I said, it's worse to me. I get it. Like there's bad guys out there. Like I said, the mob, we went against a lot, and they're mobsters. They grew up in that culture, and that's what they do. It's like the whole scorpion and frog thing. But the ones that cross the line, the cops that provide information to the mob, that and vice versa, and the FBI guys that give information to the Russians, I think is a bigger betrayal, because other ones aren't pretending to be someone else. And there's sick pedophiles out there, and they do their thing, and then the ones that go into the police work and then that do it again, I think there's a step. They're all bad, but that's even worse, because everybody who trusts that then gets into the thing, and that's why the bad priest, I mean the good priest should call out the bad priests, and then the good Boy Scouts and Cub Scouts and all those people should call out the ones that aren't bad, and the good police officers need to start calling out the bad police officers, and just have that moral courage. It's not easy, but if you go into gunfights, you get killed, you should be able to go into internal affairs and say, this is not right.
Absolutely.
I have a question about, what does the FBI categorize as grooming, and I think Sandra's case also has some trafficking that goes along with it too. You know, she was being introduced to other men.
So I'm not going to comment on like what the actual like the definition of grooming. You know, our folks that work in the behavioral science units and other things that work these things, they probably have it like all laid down. But I think grooming is what we talked about is like the tentative approach, the first interaction. One, identifying who has that weakness that you're looking for, be it a bad family life, be it like you're looking for attention and whatever. They spot onto it. And then they test it a little bit, and then they test a little bit more, and then they test a little bit more. I think that goes into the grooming thing. And each one probably has their own style or whatever. It's always going to be in the beginning something that they can deny. Like I just said she had nice hair. I like where her ponytail was out, so I fixed it. And it's a touching, it's this and that, and seeing how they react. Do they tell anyone? And if they don't, then you step it up the next time, and then the next time it's a little bit more. I think that goes into grooming on it, and that's why your questions to your kids, especially in the beginning, when they're ever out of your sight with another adult that is in the situation, talking to them at the end in just general terms, like, oh, how did it go? Who do you talk to? And oh, you were with so and so. Like what did you guys talk about? And if they start telling you like, well, he said my hair looked nice and I was pretty that day, I would be like, F no. Like you don't tell, if you're an adult, you don't tell a 10-year-old she's pretty. Like that doesn't come out of your mouth type of thing, especially in a certain setting. So it's one of those things that you got to understand what questions maybe to ask with grooming that come up, because, and then you talk about trafficking. Absolutely. This case, the fact, like, I don't even know how they get to the point where they know who to traffic this girl to. Like it must have been, again, locker room, whatever it was, but they knew who to pass to. And then we have a term in New Jersey, scumbag, with the dog, like giving, like, are you kidding me? Like you're using like cute animals to do this, but he knew exactly what he was doing. Like it was one of those things that comes out there that like, so it just, it's hard to think about.
Hard.
Sorry, I know I have tons of questions, but William Farrell was looking himself up in the system where you could look up plates and all different things where all the different jurisdictions have stuff. He looked himself up 24 times, and he was also looking Sandra up. I'm just a little, obviously not a law enforcement, but I was wondering if he was trying to figure out if there was an investigation against him or something.
He was probably looking for all that. So
and could that be a crime to be looking himself up like that?
So in the FBI, it made, if you use a database for non-case, that's grounds for getting fired. So I looked at it. I remember when I first moved to Miami, odd story. I was at the gym, and the guy I spotted was friendly, and we figured out we lived in an apartment complex next to each other. And as I was driving out of the parking lot, he was walking, and I said, "Hey, you want to ride?" And he said, "Yeah, sure." So he gets in my car. I drive back, drop him off, and the next day I get called into the assistant special agent in charge of the drug program. And I'm working fugitives, and I'm like, my supervisor's like, what's going on? I said, I have no idea. I walk in, and he's got an office full of people. And he asked me how I knew this Russian name. I said, I have no idea what you're talking about. I've only lived here 5 days. He goes, well, do you know Tarzan? I said, I don't know anyone. And he pulls up a picture, and he goes, well, what are you doing with this guy? And it was a Russian mobster that was trying to buy a diesel sub to bring cocaine into the country. That's the guy I picked up in my car. So after that, I'm like, holy cow, I'm here a week and I'm picking up Russian drug lords to, you know. So when I was looking for places to live, I would like go into our database to see like, hey, what surveillance is in this neighborhood in general. And like Miami had just about every neighborhood had some surveillance, but they eventually made that illegal to even do because of the abuse like that. Like I was literally looking like my neighbors, like cartel guys, or they money launderers or whatever, just trying to figure it out because I got burned on the like 5th day in the office of, you know, a Russian, you know, sub guy. But people started using that for different reasons. So now every time you go into an FBI database, you have to reference a case, and it has to be something that, because it is grounds to get fired. So the fact that he was looking it up, he was probably looking up everything in general to see that, because if she came up in a case that was, there's classifications for cases. So if it was a child abuse, whatever it was, he was definitely looking up to see if his name or her name was referenced, and he could probably figure out what case it was. And that absolutely should be illegal if you're using it for personal reasons.
Yeah, that's how I figured it was. But I've always, that's one of the things I mention about him, because I feel like, especially him, he goes with the trafficking portion, because he was the one, you know, introducing her to other men. He was the one telling her to take videos of her having intercourse with other men and send him the videos, take photos of the whatever was going on with other men and send him the videos. So to me, he is the one that falls under the trafficking portion.
I would say the worst kind, because I think he was probably using it for his own perversion and for
Blackmail
on other people. So
Yep.
I like, he definitely, they said he's not the criminals sometimes are very smart in how they do crimes. So he was definitely using that as leverage against her too, against whoever she was having sex with, and as a perversion too. So I think all three of them came into play with him, and he had things on other cops, and it might have been that, you know, whatever. It just, again, one of the worst ones out there, I think, just based on that alone, because it was on multiple levels that he was just perverted and corrupt and just awful.
covered a lot.
Yeah.
Mizzy, people were asking about you. They want to know more about you too, because I maybe didn't introduce you enough. I figured people already knew you.
Oh, I mean,
Yeah,
I've been on the show so many times, people should know me, but I know you
we
have a
have
lot
new,
more
we have new
viewers that
followers
haven't been
every
around.
day. It's so weird.
I'm a very, very, very small content creator. My page is called A Mixed Girl in a Mixed Up World. I haven't been doing anything except Sandra stuff lately. I don't even know what I have posted on YouTube for Sandra, because things have been crazy, especially the last month since the information came out about Dr. Bodden. Right now, my whole life is Sandra. I wake up in the morning thinking about her. I go to bed thinking about her. And I'm just trying to use my voice to get this young woman some justice, because what happened to her is unacceptable. It's unacceptable. Nobody's been charged, and it's unacceptable that these men are still on the street to do it to somebody else. So I don't know what else everybody wants to know about me, but that's about it. There's not, right now, that's all my life is, pretty much, Sandra.
And you have.
Well, thank you. I mean, that's the biggest thing is like, she hasn't disappeared. Like, and that, like, I don't think you're going to sit still until justice is served. Which is one of those things I go into, you know, some of the stuff I've done in the FBI. You just don't give up. You don't ever stop when someone says that's enough. You just don't stop. You just keep driving and keep going, because eventually, hopefully, that happens. And contact me on the side, and we're going to talk.
Awesome.
Because again, it's like, you know, and some of the shows I've talked about chasing a pirate around Africa for 2 months. He killed 4 Americans. And just we just want to stop. Like it was one of those things. The team I was with, because it's the right thing to do. They weren't there anymore. Sandra's not there anymore, but and her baby. Don't stop. Hopefully, eventually, justice gets done. And the fact is that we're all talking about her. We're remembering her, and we're now exposing a bunch of other things, just not with this police department, with other police departments and the Explorer program and pedophiles in general. Hopefully something we've said tonight, maybe get someone to talk to their child, that brings something out. So you have to look at the other things that come from this.
Yeah.
And Mizzy, you have a Facebook group, Twitter. Tell us how people can follow.
Yeah,
you.
we have a Facebook group called Justice for Sandra Birchmore. We just launched a website called Justice for Sandra Birchmore. So please go check that out. I'm on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it, as it's at Sandra Birchmore, but my header does say Justice for Sandra Birchmore. And I'm on TikTok as Mizzy2974. So if you're on TikTok, follow, just because it helps. I can help get more people on TikTok. If we can get it going viral on TikTok, that would be amazing, because a lot of people will see it.
Awesome. I love seeing the TikTok bash ups that people do too. So if you want to use any of this content and throw it up on TikTok, people have a permission. I don't mind.
Okay, thank you. Do we have permission to use some of your content for the webpage?
Always.
Awesome.
Anything for you. I mean,
thank you.
I also want to note that Barbara, one of Sandra's relatives, has been watching and commenting tonight as well, right?
Yes. Barbara is my partner. We talk all the time, and she's been a godsend, because I didn't know Sandra, so I'm learning about Sandra through her. And it's hard to, especially when I don't have law enforcement and to go look things up and do things like that. I'm not like a detective. I'm just a layperson doing this from my chair in my living room type deal thing. And it's like, to have somebody working with me to tell me things about her and answer my questions. Should I do this? No, I don't think you should do this. Okay, because there are sometimes I want to say things that as Mizzy I would say it, but I have to ask Barb, because she's like
the family.
Yeah, because sometimes I like to pop off a little, and this has actually helped me calm down, because I think a lot more before I speak, and I just want to do right by Sandra and get her story out there, because it needs to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And we appreciate you, Mike. You've been a really good partner with us trying to get our story out there.
Of course. And you also have a standout happening in Stoughton.
Yes, on Saturday at 2:00 in Stoughton. It's at we say the Stoughton Town Hall, but it's like in the middle of the center. We're having a standout. If you're in the area, or even if you're not in the area, come join us. We want this to be a really big standout, because because of the information that was dropped about Dr. Bodden saying it was a homicide. We want them to know that we are watching, that this case is not going away, and it's not going to be brushed under the rug anymore.
Awesome. I hope a lot of people show up Saturday at 2:00.
Yes. Thank you.
We got a comment question from the great Microdots. He's got a great channel that covers Karen Reed. He says, great show. Can you explain why the case was taken from Morrissey officially?
I'm not 100% sure, but I think it has to do with the FBI. I think the FBI went to the Attorney General and said, listen, there's something wrong here, and you need to take this case. And I think it has to do with the FBI. Because
that was the question I kept asking. And,
and
we have no answer on that. We've been trying to get an answer. There's no, which is, that has to be the answer, right?
the attorney that was on the meeting the other day for the hearing for the AG's office, she was saying that it's not just us, there's other jurisdictions that are involved in this. And that like kind of tied it up for me, saying the FBI went to them and said, listen, we have this information, you guys need to take this case.
Great question from Microdots. Thank you so much for supporting, watching, and sending the question. Rob, do you have any final thoughts tonight?
I do. I was reading through the comments as quick as I can. One, it's not just girls. Someone mentioned it's boys too. Absolutely. And that's one thing you have to get over. It is just not girls, it's boys. And it's one of those things that you have to decide on your own when to bring this out. But you're the protector of your children. And it's family too, in predators. So it's one of those things that unfortunately happens, but just don't look outside to strangers is the two things I saw. Other thing is I get a bunch of things on there about some of the stories. I always say I have a Forrest Gump career. I fell into more stuff than you could imagine. I actually just did a podcast with a former police officer out of the United Kingdom, and I thought it was about something in general cases, and then he just interviewed me, and it's on my website. You guys put it out there, Sierra1.com. It's an hour and 20 minutes. I don't know to push it out because I don't like to do interviews about me specifically, because I always worked on teams that did things, but some of them are some crazy stuff. So as some people said about Story Hour with Rob, there's some of them in there, everything from when I grew up to where I ended up. I haven't watched the whole thing. I'll probably blush if I do. But if you're looking for it, it's on my website under podcast, where this will be in a little bit. But I thank you for the time. Again, Sandra deserves it. I'm not sure if it was my child. I'm not sure what I'd be doing. I don't think I could probably say it on TV. But Missy, thank you for doing it. If you ever need, we'll pass information, because if you need that law enforcement perspective, I'm there for you.
Thank you.
On my own, to just make sure that we keep pursuing this as we can, because it's just no one was there for her then, but maybe we can change that now. And the people's voice do speak. And that's the one thing when you look at the micro media, so to speak. I did all weekend on the national news on the Trump assassination, which is awful stuff. But cases like this that would just get looked over, and if it wasn't for everybody, this would never have gotten looked into, and these guys probably would still be police officers, and doing the same thing. So accountability. Let's try to change the culture from our side, and hopefully this is one of these events that does that. And hopefully for these PDs up there, both this and the Karen Reed case, that you just see some unbelievable travesties of how police work should go. Hopefully starts changing it.
Yeah.
Excellent. What did you think about the podcast that we sent you? Because I mean, I really liked it. The Kirk Minahan one. Yeah.
I like, God, they do like some podcast. I listened to, I searched it on Spotify, and I listened to podcasts, and it was these people just going back. Like some of it was like, this isn't really about the case. Like they go back and forth and nothing really about the case. And then I get to the case and I'm like, these dudes did their homework. Like absolutely did their homework. They had everything down. They did it slowly. They did it in episodes, but they had their stuff down. I usually normally do a different word. They had their stuff down, and they went through it, and they said, look, they would compare it to, okay, say his story really stands up, and he did this, but why this, and this? So it's not like saying accusatory, like that came big in the texting. Like, okay, he breaks up with her, and she's a person that goes out to everyone about all her things on the phone. Even when she's getting on the elevator, she's on her phone. He breaks up with her, and she doesn't text anybody anything, and then just kills herself.
Yeah,
Like,
people.
so they go back and forth, and they don't say accusatory. They just like, hey, what is with this? These are yellow flags that are adding up to this, and this. So I really like. I'm going to start listening to that podcast now, because I really respected how they did it and how they went through it. So if you haven't listened to it, I definitely recommend it, because it's one of those that same thing. I listen to Brother Counsel a lot on the Karen Reed case, because he's just very analytical as a lawyer. He doesn't side emotionally either way or the other. He looks at it from his perspective, and that's why I say when you look at when I do things, I'm just talking to you from a law enforcement perspective on how I see something. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying from my perspective, it's this way.
And people are asking for the link. I just posted it in the YouTube chat, thecasepodcast.com. That's where you can find that podcast. I think it's very well done. Yeah, Kurt has been around for a long time. He was like the #1 sports talk radio morning drive host. He was very controversial. He lost some sponsors. They got rid of him when he was on top. And now he's been with Barstool. He does like live shows and different podcasts. But this is something they also did, which was like a special. I hope they continue it. I think they are, aren't they? Yeah.
They did. It was season 2, but then they did an update with Turtle Boy on this.
Yes.
Because of the things back and forth, and I haven't listened to Turtle Boy as much as others have, but again, they went through, the entire case and what was odd type of thing. So I think he's going to stick with it. I really do like their podcast, so I'm going to start listening to it.
Me too.
I always refer people to it. I always say, go check out the case. If people are like, how do I start off? I say, go listen to the case, and then come back and read the reports that I have posted.
Yeah.
And then
I happen to be driving 10 hours, so I listened to it all the way through. And I kept rewinding it, because I'm like, wait, what he said. And I'm like, normally don't rewind stuff.
Yeah.
But I kept like going back and say, he said something important. I missed it. Let me pick up on it. So I do really recommend that one.
And Barbara just posted, she said, remember, stand out for Sandra on Saturday, July 20th from 2 to 5 p.m. near the Stoughton Town Hall. The weather will be perfect. Please join us. So
yes,
I hope people come out. That's Sandra's. Is that her aunt or her cousin? What is
cousin?
Cousin Barbara.
Yeah.
Thank you, Barbara. I want to thank you both for being here. Mizzy and Rob D'Amico. Sentinel1.com is your website, right?
Sierra One.
Sierra One. I'm saying Sentinel. Yeah, I trade stocks and then I say the stock. I screw up. Sierra One. Thank you. I have it written down here, and I said, yeah, I got that screw up.
2 hours went quick. I'll tell you that. Like, wow.
Yeah, it did. We're over 2 hours. 2 hours and 5 minutes. It did go quick. Yeah. Thank you so much, Mizzy and Rob D'Amico. Sierra1.com is the website. Justice for Sandra Birchmore is the Facebook group. You also have X on Twitter. Follow them both.
New website.
You got a new website too.
Yep, Justice for Sandra Birchmore website now, and they can get to either the Facebook and the Twitter from that.
Is that justiceforsandrabirchmore.com? Is that?
Yep.
Perfect. That makes it easy.
Yep.
So check both of them out. Check Rob out and check out justiceforsandrabirchmore.com, people. I really appreciate everyone who's been watching, supporting. Thank our guests tonight. Thank you so much for spending time with us. And we'll talk soon. Hopefully we'll have some good updates eventually, and we'll have you both back to talk about it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I'm just going to say good night to our guest. I'm just going to check a couple things here, make sure that I thank everyone. I want to thank our moderators tonight in the chat. Stephanie, Jen, MJ, Miss Shorty. I want to thank them so much for moderating our chat so I don't have to focus on it. There was some controversy like a week ago. I really don't give a shit, because it's like, you know what? Like, I got 35,000 people. It's more than I could ever want, and if someone's helping me moderate my chat, I'm very appreciative of it. No matter how, if the random person gets upset about it, it's just like, come on. Be nice in the chat. That's the key. Be nice to people. Tonight, everyone was nice. I don't think there was one issue tonight. Everyone was wicked nice in the chat tonight, all for the good cause. I want to thank everyone. But I want to thank our moderators, because sometimes people aren't nice, and I don't have to deal with it anymore. I don't even have to worry about it. It's handled by our wonderful moderators. So I'm very appreciative of them. They also post a lot of the great links from our guests, which is very helpful. And I'm just checking Venmo and Cash App. I don't think any came in tonight. I don't think I saw any. Let me just make sure. Oh, I did. Candace sent $5 on the Cash App. She said she sent it $5 for Morrissey for Prison 2024. I love that. That's a great message, Candace. I'm with you. Morrissey for Prison 2024. That should be a new political campaign. Very well done, Candace. Thank you so much for donating. I also want to thank Holly, who made a donation the other night. I don't know if we got to read it off. She made a donation $5 the other night as well. Thank you so much. I want to thank everyone who super chatted tonight too. Biker Dots, Justice for All, Dewey, thank you so much. Thank you, Highest Good, frequent contributor. Thank you so much. And there's Candace again. Thank you, Candace. And Justice for All has been very generous tonight. Several super chats tonight. Thank you so much. Also, Lady in Boston, thank you. I gotta know. These are frequent super chatters. I really appreciate you guys. Dewey, Lady in Boston with another one. Thank you so much. I gotta know with another one. It's Stephanie, one of our moderators. Thank you so much. She gifted 10 Young Jerks memberships. Miss Shorty, another moderator, making a donation tonight. Thank you so much. And Stephanie earlier. Guys, rule. Thank you so much. I'm not sure when we're going to do another show. It might be tomorrow night. We're checking with Betero. I think we may do something with Betero. Thank you, Medic V. I know you. Thank you so much. All right, I hope everyone has a great Friday tomorrow. And again, I want to thank Rob D'Amico and Mizzy for being here tonight. Thank our moderators. Thank you, everyone contributing, watching, supporting. Have a great night. We might see you tomorrow night. I think we may do a show tomorrow night. We'll see. Probably maybe Friday and Saturday. I might even do a Friday, Saturday show and take off Sunday. I think that may be the schedule. We will see very shortly. Check out our YouTube. Make sure you follow us. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Please subscribe. About half of you watch every single show and you never subscribe. Just hit that bell. A lot of you have, though. I really appreciate it that it's interesting. And so it's an interesting feeling to know how much we've grown this year and have Mizzy on the show a bunch of times and then realize I have to introduce her again because so many people are new. Every couple of weeks we get like another avalanche of a bunch of new people. So it's been an amazing ride. If you're new to our show, thank you for subscribing and following us. I don't think you're going to be disappointed. All right, we'll see you probably tomorrow night. Have a great night, everyone. Good night.